Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Writer Podcast, where we talk about writing, publishing, and most of all, the mindset you need to flourish as an author in the modern 21st century publishing world. And I'm extremely happy and very proud to announce our guest today. Well, first of all, I'm Hannah Steenbock, a German author and coach. My partner in podcasting is Diane
Patterson. I'm a novelist and blogger.
And our guest today is none other than David Gaughran. Welcome.
Yes. Hello, guys. Thanks for inviting me along.
We can give you a short intro, or you can give your own intro. I don't know if you have one prepared about.
Oh, I definitely want to hear your intro.
Well,
I might actually steal it, so I'm taking notes there.
David is the winner of the International Men's Mustache Competition, as you can tell by the... No, David has a long and storied history, both in publishing his own fiction and in publishing a number of guides for the self-publisher to learn this new world of self-publishing. Probably his best-known book is Let's Get Digital, which came out with a second edition this year, was it?
Last September.
Okay.
Still relatively fresh.
Okay, well, welcome to my world where it's either last week, 5 months ago, and Let's Get Visible, a guide to promoting yourself and your books. He is quite audible on the web. Wait, that's not what you want to talk about when you're on the web. He's quite visible, I guess, on the web with his posts about the problems that self-publishers and people who want to start self-publishing can run into, because there's the on-ramp of simply learning what you're doing, and then there's the on-ramp of evading all the people who want to take advantage of you. And David has lots to say on that topic.
Yes.
So what else would you add to that?
I want to add that it was actually Let's Get Digital that made me go into self-publishing. That was together with another book by what's her name, Catherine. I should have done my research.
But there were two. Captain Ryan Howard, was it?
Yes, it was. There were two books out there, and I read them both, and they've really made it seem so simple that I decided I wanted to go that way. And I found a good partner, and they take my manuscripts and make them beautiful, and they help me with advertising material. So I didn't go all the way on my own, which is okay, but I certainly got encouraged, and that was the first time I saw it as a viable path after reading Let's Get Digital, and I'm grateful for that, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Well, thank you very much.
So you primarily do historical fiction, correct? Now I think I have some speculative fiction stories by you, but your novels have been historical.
Yeah, it's what I consider my main genre, but I actually took a while before putting something out in that genre, and took even longer again before I repeated the trick. I started off writing kind of weird short stories. I think I released 2, was the first thing I ever released. I had this historical novel pretty much written. It was the one that I'd been querying for about 18 months, and I got pretty close to getting an agent, and then kind of kept falling at the last hurdle. But I was still waiting to hear back from a few agents, so I was keeping it in reserve. But I was very much thinking about self-publishing, and I started off. I think, like a lot of people, I was torn. I wasn't sure whether to self-publish. I was hearing all these. This is back in 2011. I was hearing all these stories of people selling thousands of books a month. But I was also hearing all the warnings. There was a lot of people back then, especially, saying things like self-publishing could ruin your career, or that people in the industry won't take you seriously, or that you'll never make any money, or that you could be scammed. And it turned out like none of that was true, except for the scam part, which we'll get to in a bit. And I'd say if we were talking 4 years ago, we'd probably have to spend our whole time talking about that. But I think all those myths have been shattered now. There's just so many people out there selling so many books, and self-publishing has grabbed so much of the market now, something like a third of the US ebook market, that no one with a straight face can say that you can't make money self-publishing. You clearly can. But at the time, it was a live question. So I wanted to experiment by just seeing if I could learn the ropes by publishing a few short stories. And when I went out to look for information, like all the information on how to publish was out there, but it seemed to be scattered across 1,000 different blog posts. And I was actually unemployed at the time. I just moved to Sweden and I was looking for work, so I had plenty of time on my hands. So I just went through in quite an analytical way and just kind of put together all the existing information that was out there and tried to put it together into a coherent argument for people to read. I was actually a total newbie when I wrote the first edition of that book. I think I'd sold 150 books. I think I'd been self-publishing for like 6 weeks or something crazy like that. But I was leaning on the advice of authors who had done a lot more than me. I was trying to synthesize all the advice that was out there, because there wasn't that many guides. I actually didn't know about Catherine Ryan Howard's guide at the time. But I think her book and my book were two of the only books out at the time. Now there's lots of them, of course. So yeah, I was really wet behind the ears when I wrote that, and then I didn't do the second edition for another 3.5, 4 years or something. And when I went back to write it, obviously a lot had changed, but I was pretty surprised at how well some of my newbie observations had kind of held up over the years. Yeah. And I quietly deleted the ones that that hadn't held up so well. But so then I released a few short stories. I released Let's Get Digital, and then it wasn't until several months after that I finally pulled the historical novel out of the drawer and released that. But I would consider, that was a very long answer to your question, I would consider historical fiction my main genre.
But I assume that this whole doing the self-publishing guides, the warnings about the scammers, etc., must take up a whole bunch of your time, of your energy, of your focus these days. No?
Yeah, it does. You have to be very careful, because looking into stuff like this, it can be extremely time consuming, because for obvious reasons you have to be careful about what you say when you write a blog post about somebody potentially scamming somebody else. You always have to be careful that the information you're putting out there on such a serious topic is as accurate as possible. So yes, if I'm writing a blog post about a company that might be scamming somebody else, then I have to be really, really careful, and that obviously takes a lot longer to write than a hot take on the new Kindle or something. But these days, I think when I started off, I was blogging nearly every day, and obviously that wasn't sustainable if you want to be primarily spending your time writing fiction. So I cut back a lot over the years, and now I think I write a blog post once a month or something. Yeah. So it took me a long time to just discipline myself to spend most of my time writing fiction and learning how to write fiction better. It's difficult. It's difficult when you're just starting out and you're trying different things to see what works, and you might write a blog post and you might sell 3 or 4 copies of your book on the back of it, and you're thinking well, I should write 1,000 more blog posts, but it doesn't really work like that. It took me a while to kind of corral all my instincts and try and stick to writing in one genre and be disciplined about certain things, and not writing all over the map, and finally deciding to write a series instead of standalones, and all these things that are just making it harder for yourself.
And I mean, we focus a lot on mindset, and I mean that was awesome hearing how you actually entered the whole indie author life, because basically it is life. And I keep asking this every guest that we have. What do you think is the most important mindset for someone who wants to self-publish, write the stories they love, and eventually make money with them?
Well, I think it's good to focus on mindset, because I think writers writers generally are focusing on one book. You know, they've been querying a book for months, or they've been workshopping it, or they've been bringing it to creative writing groups, or they've just been doing draft after draft after draft. And we all know, I'm sure every writer knows an extreme case of, you know, a writer friend who's been working on the same book for, you know, 12 years or something, and you wonder if they'll ever finish it. And without a change in mindset, they probably won't, to be quite frank. And I know what that's like, you know, because you know, I'm naturally a slow writer. The first book that I actually, you know, sent out to other people, that took me, I think, 3 years to write the first draft, and then over the 18 months, that was the Storm Hits Valparaiso. Yeah, because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I had a little bit of experience in my professional career from writing nonfiction, to a certain extent, but none whatsoever in writing fiction. And I've always found that, you know, much harder to write than nonfiction, which just seems to come quite naturally. So yeah, it took me ages to write the first draft, and then, you know, I thought I was finished, and it was only when I started sending it out to agents that I realized it was actually a first draft, and it needed a lot more work. But I'd say I was probably done with it after like maybe 4 years working on it on and off. So that's a lot of time. But I actually can't remember what the question was. I've gone so far off the tangent now. Oh yeah, the mindset.
The mindset.
Yeah, so, you know, I know what it's like to get down that deep in one book, and you really fall in love with the story. You have to carry it on your back for that long. But I think I would have been better off. This is strange to say about something that's out there and published now, and I'm still quite proud of it when I look back. But in terms of developing as a writer, I probably should have let that book go at some point and started another one. I probably would have gotten to the point where I am now as a writer quicker if I'd, you know, cut the umbilical cord. And I think a lot of writers do that. They focus on the same book because they can't say, they've had so many rejections, they put so many hours into it, they'll consider it a waste if they let it go. But it's not a waste. You're learning all the time, you know, you're becoming a better writer every time you work on something. And there's a kind of a strange, I don't know, I've never really floated this with other writers, so I'd love to hear what you guys think. But I sometimes think that you don't step up as a writer until you start the next project. It's like all the stuff you learned writing one book doesn't kick in until you start a new book. And I feel that every time I sit down with a new book, it's like I feel like, you know, I've just gotten a power up or something, you know, that I can feel it kicking in. Like, you know, if I was really trying to work on dialogue in the last book, I'll find that this time the dialogue is the thing that's coming really easy, and it's something else, maybe descriptive passages, that I'm struggling with a bit more. And I don't know if that's a function of, you know, deliberately trying to focus on one particular task in each book, or if every writer feels that. But I've noticed that every time I start something new. So I think, you know, in terms of mindset, I'd say if you wanted to sum it all up in a less rambly way, I would say that newbie writers need to stop focusing on the book, you know, and start focusing on a career. That book may or may not get written. That book may or may not get published. That book may or may not be a huge success. But it's going to be the first stepping stone in a career. And start thinking long term. Start thinking about where you'd like to be in 10 years' time. Start thinking about how you get there. You know, like it's fine to indulge every little artistic caprice that you get. But you know, if you want to actually build a career, if you want to make money, if you want this to be your primary source of income, you're going to have to curb some of your artistic impulses. You know, you don't have to do it completely. It's not selling out. Like I actually prefer. Well, I used to prefer writing standalones, and I thought I would be kind of selling out in some sense if I wrote a series. But then when I actually sat down, I've just written the first book in a series and just started the second one. And it's actually a totally different intellectual challenge, and I have a lot more respect for it, and I had a lot more fun doing it than I thought I would have. And I still want to write standalones, but you know, there's nothing wrong with writing 2 books in a series and then 1 standalone in a year, and that way you get to tickle that itch and or scratch that itch. You probably shouldn't tickle an itch. you get to scratch that itch, and then you get to do something maybe slightly more sensible in terms of, you know, what's going to bring in the sales. And you know, trying to write something that's maybe a little more commercial, it doesn't mean it's going to be anything less artistic. It was kind of strange when I look back at the draft that I've just written. It's arguably the most serious book that I've written, and I was actually trying to write something like a little lighter, you know, a little more commercial, and that's just the way it came out. So, you know, like, you should always challenge your assumptions, because, you know, everyone's usually holding a few flawed ones, and it can lead you to interesting places.
Well, I have 6 or 7 novels in the drawer, that I haven't published. They are in German. They are from the time when I had a German agent who never managed to sell any of my novels. They're in various stages of completion, and I thought, well, why not go back and translate them and throw them up on the market. And I started translating the first German novel that I wrote, and I stopped translating it because I'll have to go through a rewrite with that one because
I would think that you would have developed so much as a writer that you would just
that was 15 years ago,
and moving it to a different language, that you would just be better off taking the story and rewriting it.
Yeah, and I might actually go and forget. I mean, it's a good first draft, and I've shown it to plenty of people, and they loved it, and they said, go and publish it. And I've just read a German fantasy novel, epic, thick, fat book that actually won the prize for best indie author book at the last Frankfurt Book Fair. And I met the author. She lives near where I live, and she's a lovely person. But the whole story is, I was quite upset, really. It's the oldest fantasy trope imaginable about the young girl being, not knowing that she's the mage of a prophecy who will save the world, and she gets abducted and tortured and rescued, and before she even understands what's going on. And it's like, yeah, I've seen that 500 million times before. And so I was thinking, well, I can just take my story as bad as it is and throw it on the German market, and it'll sell because it's something else. So,
Lord, no, we are not going to have that mindset. the crap plus one mindset. No.
You can always throw it out under a pen name, and then you don't have to admit to it unless it's very well received.
That's true.
True. Yeah. Well, I'm going to rewrite it, but yeah, I think that's what I agree with what you said, because that was the whole point for bringing it up. Because I do think we develop as writers with every novel that we write. I've done a couple of nano novels, which I basically just used to challenge me to get the word count in, and they came out structured. And the last nano novel that I did came out much more structured than anything I've written before, and that is one that I feel good about publishing the way it is. Again, German, it's in its transition phase into English. So I agree, we should keep writing and not try to improve the same old book for 10 years. That's not going to bring progress.
Well, I want to talk about the path of the new writer getting involved in self-publishing, who has this book that they've been working on, that they're just, this is the book of their heart. They've massaged it for 20 or 25 years, whatever. So the easy path would be they take their book. It is, of course, received wisdom, so it is perfect as is. They make a cover with the title on it, and they put it on Amazon.
They take a Word document and upload it.
Yeah, they take a Word document and they put it. Yes, so that way, yeah, exactly. For those of you listening to this, David just covered his face with his hands and wept. That is the easiest way you would, in fact, have. I know someone who actually did exactly that in the past week. You would have a book on Amazon that you could give people the link to. That's probably not what you want to put up as your book. What is the path that you would suggest for a new writer? Just trying to figure this whole process out.
Okay, so the new writer needs to remember that the only important brand in publishing is the author's name. Aside from mega-selling series like Harry Potter or Jack Reacher, when we're talking at a more realistic level, the only real brand that has any appeal to readers is the author's name. So your name literally is your brand. Usually you only get one chance with a reader. Readers will be the most loyal customers in the world if you keep giving them something remotely like what they want. Once you win them over, they will stay tremendously loyal to you. But if you disappoint them the first time round, you're unlikely to get a second chance with them. So like first impressions are really, really important. So that means a number of things. Like first of all, you should only really publish your best work. You know, every professional author out there has at least one trunk novel that is going to hide in a drawer. Well, hopefully hide in a drawer, given the current bestseller. That they don't want published for whatever reason. Maybe the book was half cooked. Maybe it was missing something. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why a story won't work. And you have to be brave enough sometimes to say this isn't working. And you have to be brave enough sometimes to listen to people when they say it's not working and not be too bullish about it. But aside from, let's just assume that you have a good story. That's not the end of your work at all. There's essentially three main tasks a writer faces, and that's writing, marketing, writing, publishing, and marketing. Now, in terms of publishing, I think that's the one that authors probably get most worried about, that they won't be able to handle, and you know, that's the reason why they might seek an agent or a publisher or seek one of these full-service self-publishing companies. But they really shouldn't. It's actually the easiest step out of the three, and I think both of you guys would agree. Like publishing a book is literally just following a set of road steps, and anybody can do it. Like if you can operate an email account, you can follow these steps. Now, that doesn't mean that you should do everything yourself. Like far from it. I think it's very important to hire in professionals to do things like your cover, and to do things like editing, and to do things like formatting your ebook if you don't know how to do it yourself, or if you don't have the time to learn. But like doing that is relatively easy. Like you just check with a few author friends. You get, you know, it's like hiring any professional. It's like, you know, when you need to hire a lawyer or a plumber or anything else. You check with your friends. You get a referral. You check them out. You make a short list, and then you pick one, and then you go for it. Like it's people have built this up, like this mystique which has attached itself to the publishing process over the years, probably due to, you know, the reputation that people like to cultivate for various reasons. But it's actually quite simple, you know. And the irony is that when you go out there and you hire a freelance editor, sometimes it's a freelance editor who also works for, you know, the big 5 publishers. So sometimes you're literally getting the exact same editor and cover designer. So, you know, like replicating what these guys do isn't impossible. You know, like doing it all excellently. Like when you look at the very biggest sellers out there, people like Barbara Freethy and Bella Andre, like there is a certain kind of X factor to their presentation. There's a certain coherence to it, and like nailing that can be hard. It can take you a little bit of practice, and publishers usually don't nail it. You know, like it's only like a small fraction of stuff really gets the whole package perfect. So it's hard to do, and it takes experience. But like you will get there eventually. Like I see authors, because, you know, I've been around, which is pretty much, you know, not forever in digital publishing terms, like for the last 4 or 5 years. And on forums like Kboards, everyone has their signature where you can see their book covers. And just seeing people develop that skill is really cool. Like I think in 2011, standards might have been a little bit lower in terms of covers and editing and formatting. But self-publishers have very quickly not just caught up with the best practices of large publishers. I'd argue that we exceed them in a lot of cases, and certainly in things like formatting and metadata, I think we're way ahead of them, and in marketing. I think with covers, again, this is another time when authors need to curb some of their natural artistic impulses. I think a classic newbie mistake is they might be writing something like mysteries, and they might have a very literary cover, something like a black and white photograph, or something that evokes maybe literary fiction or historical fiction rather than a straight up mystery. And authors need to remember that they only have 2 seconds to grab a reader. You know, readers might be scrolling down through the search listings on Amazon or the charts if you're lucky, and you know, they might see this postage stamp size cover. You don't have a lot of room for subtlety there. You need to grab them. You need to tell them straight away what kind of book it is. It's kind of like more like designing an icon for an app or, you know, a desktop program. You have this very small little space to work in, and you just basically need a symbol of what it is. Like, you know, that's why thrillers will often have, you know, a body on the cover or a gun or some crime scene, and it's purely because you want to tell the reader straight away, this is a thriller, this is a book that you like, click on it. Authors generally don't like doing things the way other people did them. We like doing things our own way. You know, we like, you know, it's like showing our little peacock feathers. Look how I did this. Look how I rejected all the genre conventions of thrillers. Well, you know, I think the place to dazzle people with your originality is inside the book, with your words and your characters and your fresh take on, you know, all the classic tropes, not with your book cover.
But David, I'm a writer. I wrote the book. I can't handle all this other stuff. Can't I just give that all to someone and they can take care of it for me? Please?
You can, and they'll take most of the money too. So that's, you know, that's the deal. Like, are you gonna put on your big girl pants and make a few decisions about a cover and get 70%, or are you gonna farm that out to somebody and only get, you know, 14.9%? That's the choice. You know, you can have someone else do it all for you, and then, you know, you're only going to get you know, a small part of the money. I prefer to, you know, do a little bit of learning and, you know, get most of the money.
Well, there are companies that do, you know, there are companies that do almost everything, but you need to shop around for them. You need to get referrals. You need to ask your friends, and that's how I found the people who helped me with my books. I saw someone else replace their covers on the stories. I saw the stories getting edited, and I thought, let me see who those people are and how much they charge for their services.
So what does this company do for you? They do formatting, they do editing, and they do the covers?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that there's at least one company, I think Catherine Rush talks about them. I'll have to look it up. It starts with Red.
I think there's several. I mean, if you join some Facebook groups and ask around, most of them have lists of people they work with. There's tons of editors out there, tons of formatting people. A lot of formatting people do the covers. And you just have to, I mean, that's the work you have to do as an indie author. You have to go out and look at what they do. And you need to find someone who's familiar with your genre for the cover. But there's hundreds out there.
This is the first level mistake I see a lot of writers make, which is, okay, I am handling this whole business by myself, but I don't want to pay a lot for my editing. You know, I don't want to pay a lot for my cover. I want to make money at this.
Well, I think, you know, with most things you can either pay with time or money, or with sweat or money, you know. But when it comes to something highly specialized like editing, I think especially, like, I don't want to be too definitive here and say you should always hire an editor, even though I believe that, because there are, you know, there's always exceptions to everything in publishing. There are some, you know, notable exceptions out there who don't use editors and they just use a circle of fellow writers as beta readers. A newbie is not going to be able to pull that off. Let's be straight about that. So, you know, when you're going to need the most intensive editorial help at the start. So that's all the more reason to use a professional, qualified editor. That's not, you know, the local news reporter or the local high school English teacher or whatever. Like, editing is a very specialized task, and you know what? It is expensive, but it's an investment in you and your career. Every time I go through the editorial process, you know, if you've got a good editor, she should be providing you with all sorts of notes along the way, explaining why all your mistakes are so terrible, and hopefully you'll learn from that. You know, like I certainly do. Every time I go through the process, I feel like I become a better writer just by getting that feedback from someone who's trained to, you know, look for dangling modifiers and flabby prose and cardboard characters. Like, I just can't, you know, I'm kind of nervous about writing a shopping list without getting an editor to go over it sometimes, because, you know, I found a good editor right at the start and I've used her for everything now. So, like, I understand why people will get a little bit nervous about these kind of things, like finding a good editor or finding a good cover designer. There's one kind of easy solution to all of this. Get plugged into the self-publishing community right from the start. You know, you don't have to wait until you publish your first book. There's all sorts of forums out there. I think Kboards is the biggest one in terms of kind of, you know, traditional forums. But there's all sorts of Facebook groups. There's all sorts of writers who have blogs which will talk you through all the steps. And you don't even have to pay a penny for any of this information. You just have to put in a bit of time researching it. And, you know, writers say that they just want to focus on the writing and they don't want to do any of this stuff. Well, like, you know, you're going to have to, because, you know, if you want to sell books, if you actually want to convince readers to part with their hard-earned money and spend some of their limited time reading your stuff, you have to be a bit more professional about this. You can't just magically hope that your books are going to get discovered and that readers will find them and everyone will rave about your genius and that you won't have to do anything other than, you know, upload it to Amazon. you're going to have to take some control here and do something proactive to get your book into people's hands. And the very first step in that is learning about the business, making contacts, and hiring professionals to make sure that your book is professionally presented, so that you don't look like an amateur when you're asking a reader to spend money on your stuff.
Okay, so then there are writers who invest the time, who realize that this is a business. I mean, you wouldn't open a corner shop without, I don't know, figuring out the location or painting the inside. Why people think they can get started in writing without doing those things, I don't know. But they do. So you have the writers who do some research, who find the editors, who find the covers, who figure it out. Then you get the other writers who want to give it all to someone and say, please handle this for me. By the way, this happens. I went to film school. I was down in Los Angeles for a while. You see this with screenwriters too. It's like, but I wrote the script. Can't I just give it to someone and they make a movie out of it? And it's like, no. What you're selling is your ability to sell the next project. You're selling the ability to write whatever they give you. You're not selling your ability to write your own script. Anyhow, so So what happens with these writers who are say, here, just take my book and make it pretty and put it out there? They run across bad guys. Where are they running across them?
They Google how to publish my book.
Yeah. So if you go onto Google and you just type in, I need an agent, or I need a publisher, or how do I publish my book, invariably the results on the right-hand side, the ads, will be all coming from one company, and that company is called Author Solutions. And one of the things that they have been criticized for is running these faux comparison sites. So if you click on a lot of these ads, and you can do the search yourself and verify this, you'll see all these kind of sites like choosemypublisher.com, and it's presented in kind of a disingenuous way. It's kind of purporting to be some kind of independent consultant comparing the different companies out there, because Author Solutions has something like, I don't know off the top of my head, it's something like 18 or 20 different imprints. There's Archway, there's Balboa, there's Author House, there's Trafford, there's Ex Libris, there's Palibrio, Book Tango, the list goes on, and there's so many of them. So our imaginary newbie will go to Google and type in, I need a publisher. This site will come up, chooseapublisher.com in the ads. They'll click on it, and then it will say, you know, here's an online questionnaire where we're going to find out which is the perfect book publisher for you. And they ask, you know, what genre you are, how long your book is, what kind of experience you have, what your budget is for, you know, how much money you want to spend on making it a success, all this kind of stuff. And they'll come back with the perfect answer for you, and they'll pick one of their own imprints only. So a lot of people get kind of fooled by this stuff because it's quite slick, you know. I think it's unfair to blame the people that get swept up in this, because we all have to kind of remember what it was like when we were starting out and we didn't know anything about agents or publishers. Like I could have easily fallen for a scam like this. I didn't. I was lucky to find the good information before the bad information. But I don't think we should judge these people too harshly. You don't know what to search for. That's the problem, you know. You don't know what to search for when you're starting out, and that's you do start off with these really basic kind of searches because you don't know what to search for. And some people will fall into the hands of those that are less scrupulous. So yeah, people will go to these comparison sites, and then they'll hand over their phone number, and then invariably they'll be plagued with phone calls to buy one of these extremely expensive packages to publish your book. And you know, these companies like Author Solutions, they rarely release any kind of public figures, but when they used to be owned by a Wall Street venture capital firm, and when they went on the market in 2012, when they were looking for a purchaser, they released all this information into the public domain. And I've covered all this in my blog in great detail, but just in general terms, Author Solutions said that the average customer spends $5,000 publishing their book. And this is figures coming directly from Author Solutions, so there's nothing controversial about this. And they also said, the CEO at the time, Kevin Weiss, he also said that the average Author Solutions customer only sells 150 copies of their book. Now, you can see that this isn't working out particularly well for Author Solutions customers. And at this stage, I think they've published something like 220,000 titles from 195,000 authors or something like that since probably around 2005 or something like that. So we're talking about something that's happening on a huge scale, and it's happening under the auspices of Penguin Random House, because the company that decided to buy them in July 2012 for I think it was 114 million or 116 million dollars. That company was Penguin. Now, if you think about the craziness of all this and all these arguments that are going on in publishing about Amazon having too much dominance, like I remember one particular freak out when Amazon bought Goodreads. And it was the usual sky is falling kind of stuff. That Amazon is taking over. They want to destroy the world. Jeff Bezos wants to build a spaceship out of authors' bones. All this kind of stuff, And they were like, publishers can't compete. They don't have the deep pockets of Amazon. And Penguin was just after buying Author Solutions for the same price they could have got Goodreads for, And which do you think? Which of those purchases do you think is a smart bet in the future? And which is a desperate kind of attempt to empty the pockets of people. You can make your own mind up there. But I think Author Solutions isn't going to be around in 5 or 10 years' time. I think so many people now are aware that you don't have to spend $5,000 to publish a book. So many people have slightly higher ambitions than selling more than 150 copies of their book, and these people are discovering that there's thousands of people out there now, thousands of success stories. I can name so many people that have sold 1 million books. I can name even more that have sold 100,000, and even there's probably even thousands of people out there now who are either making a living from writing, or they're paying significant bills like their mortgage every month. And I'd say not one of them is using Author Solutions, because I regularly track the rankings of their books, and they're virtually all doing terribly. There's only like the odd exception now and then will have a spurt of selling 1 or 2 copies, but like most of them are doing terribly. And I think everyone working at Penguin Random House should be ashamed of what's being done in that company's name. Like, Penguin probably had the best reputation in terms of a brand, I'd say, in both writing and reading circles, until the stuff they started pulling in the last few years. The price fixing trial, the treatment of authors, the underpayment of royalties. Like, I don't know what these guys are doing. Self-publishers often get accused of having some kind of bitterness towards publishers, which is a bit weird, because generally we were rejected by agents rather than publishers, and I don't think anyone accuses us of having huge enmity towards agents. We just kind of ignore them for the most part. But I think a lot of, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but talking about myself, a lot of the negative disposition I would have towards companies like Simon & Schuster and Penguin Random House is because of this kind of stuff. Like, when did it get okay to upsell thousands of dollars of worthless marketing services to some retired person that's taken out a second mortgage to publish their book? When did that kind of thing become okay? When did we move the ethical line in this industry? There used to be very clear lines about what was acceptable and what was unacceptable. Organizations like the AAR and the Authors Guild and all these people, it's their role to stand up and say this is acceptable and this is unacceptable, and they're not doing it. They're all asleep on the job. The Authors Guild and Authors United and all these people would like to spend all this time trying to convince us that Amazon is going to do something terrible to writers once they have total control of the market. But what about the stuff that's happening right now? The loudest voices protesting Amazon never have anything to say about Author Solutions. They never have anything to say about Publish America or all these other companies. And like, Author Solutions is just one of many. There are so many companies out there who don't give a damn about anything except for selling products to writers. There's only a small handful that actually want to work with writers and help them try and sell more stuff. And they're the good guys. And like Smashwords, they're good guys. Draft2Digital, they're good guys. Kobo are good guys. Amazon, KDP, all these guys are good. They're trying to help writers sell more books. They're not trying to sell them services all the time. And I think it's a bit strange to say Amazon is destroying this industry when Amazon created the most effective and free self-publishing platform, when Amazon probably has done more than any other company to put money into the pockets of writers in the last few years. Now, I'm not saying Amazon are angels. I'm not going to leave them all my money in my will or anything. Like, they're obviously
you're going to do that during your lifetime.
Yeah, totally. No, like, all these companies. Like, I used to work for Google, so I know how these tech companies work from the inside to a certain extent. And I don't trust any company. I don't consider any company my friend. I think it's kind of weird to be describing companies as friends or not your friends. Like, what company is anybody's friend? I can say that my business goals align with Amazon's at the moment, and they're likely to in the short term at least. Amazon seems to be interested in getting as many books into the hands of as many readers as possible at lower prices, and that suits my business model. So, I have no issue with Amazon. I think all this stuff about Amazon not wanting competition is only, of course, every company wants to vanquish the competition. Every company wants to grab as much market share and make as much money as possible. That's the natural inclination of a company. I think when people are saying that Amazon is destroying competition, they're only telling half the story, and I don't really believe that half of the story, but they're completely leaving out that Amazon has actually created a lot of competition in this business. If you look at things like author earnings, they clearly show that the big five have roughly a third of the US ebook market now. Indies have roughly a third, and small publishers and other non-traditional agents like newspapers publishing their own ebooks now, they have about a third of the market too. So, that is a radical change from before ebooks started. I don't know if anyone's got any figures on it, but I'd say the big 5% market share was at least 50% larger than it is now. I'd say self-publishers was virtually non-existent. I'd say small publishers was much smaller. So by Amazon opening up the distribution network, they have actually created an opportunity for guys like me to come along and take business away from these large publishers, and for small presses and university presses too, if they actually focus on trying to publish smartly and trying to learn what the best practices in digital marketing, instead of being lazy and using some distributor to distribute all their work like a lot of small presses do. The ones that are doing really well are the ones that are embracing the future and not just complaining, and they're trying to do something proactive about it, trying to learn about things like BookBub and about things like metadata. And if you look at some publishers, look at Open Road, they were a really small publisher 5 years ago, and now they're almost the size of, I don't know, they could be the size of someone like Sourcebooks, like one of those major miners just knocking on the door of the big five. So, not everyone is losing in this brave new world. I think the big five are losing. I think traditional bestsellers are seeing that market share slip and are getting worried, which is why so many of them will sign ridiculous letters. But Amazon is creating huge amounts of competition at the same time. So it's this weird paradox that they're grabbing more of the US overall book market, but they're also creating competition on the other side. And it's not just in books. There's all sorts of third-party sellers, and I think third-party sellers make up something huge, like 30 or 40% of all the sales on Amazon. So that's that's a massive platform they're creating for really small businesses like me and you.
In Germany, we have. Don't ask me about the major publishing houses in Germany. I think the big one is Random House and Bertelsmann. But I'm a member of an author group, of a German author group, and we work with a lot of small press publishers, and they have started to go the traditional way for print. They have their little print houses where they have their 500 to 1,000 print run copies print runs that they do, and they use the normal traditional distribution channels that we have in Germany. We have two major companies that handle print distribution, but they're doing ebooks, and they're using Amazon for the ebooks, and I think that's a really smart way to go. I also know some indie authors who use Amazon, which is, here in Germany we don't really have any other options. We have the Tolino, but that's minuscule. And so we have Amazon for the ebooks, and they use either print-on-demand services for the print and sell through distributors. The thing is, if you want your print book in the traditional distributors, it costs you about €400 to have it entered into their database, which is just something I'm not willing to do. So my print books are not distributed in Germany, which is kind of ridiculous. But
so I'm going to ask about something that David mentioned, which is this ecosystem of companies offering services to writers that you feel are not so great. What kind of services? I mean, I'm trying to say. I know that there are many things that I think are great, like say Scrivener, which is marketed towards writers, of course. I'm trying to think of what you mean by companies that offer things to writers that are not so fantastic.
Okay, so it was. I remember writing a blog post a few years back. I think it was in 2012, called "The Sharks Are Circling," because I was just starting to see all this stuff kind of mushroom up, and obviously it goes hand in hand with. I think in 2011, 2012 was when self-publishing really broke out and became mainstream, and when people would actually refer to it on the media without it being, the butt of some joke or something. You actually saw like writers being interviewed properly, and people taking ebooks seriously and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, because obviously the market has become a lot more lucrative and there's a lot more money around, there's a lot more people self-publishing. That creates a huge market for those who are less scrupulous. So you get all kinds of stuff. But we've always had this in the writing world. I think there's two key changes in the digital version of it that I'll talk about in a second. But we've always had things like unscrupulous literary agents charging reading fees. We've always had unscrupulous literary agents referring clients to their sister's editing company or some such. Unscrupulous publishers putting in unconscionable terms into contracts and cheating writers out of various things. You'll get that in any industry, especially any creative industry, when you have a lot of people who are desperate, quite frankly, to be published, and there's only a limited amount of slots. There's always going to be room for someone offering a shortcut. And so that's what a lot of these scammers generally try and do. They'll offer a shortcut, and the shortcut will be like the easy way to get your book published or the easy way to reach readers. Sometimes you'll see a fake ad site which will have copied the whole look and feel of BookBub, and they'll suddenly spam in all directions, all sorts of writers groups and forums and everything, and they'll try and grab in as much money as possible before they're shut down a week or two later. So like what I would say, I think as a general rule is don't trust anybody. You have to be really, really skeptical. There's so many scammers out there that the good services, the genuine, those that are actually worth your money, those that aren't a rip-off, those that won't try and sell you stuff you don't need, they're actually in the minority. So you have to be very careful. Always look at who is using their services. Like these vanity presses out there, like you don't see successful authors using their services. Like they'll have all these, smiling faces all over their websites, but like go and look at their books on Amazon and see how they're selling. Generally, they'll be out at 500,000 in the rankings or something. Whereas everyone can think of dozens and dozens of obscenely successful authors that have used KDP or that have used Smashwords or BookBub or Draft2Digital or any of these good services that everyone recommends. But again, I'd say, get connected to the self-publishing community. Join a forum or a Facebook group. Don't hand anyone any money without getting a referral from somebody you trust. Writers are always, and self-publishing is amazing in the way that people will share information. And I'm amazed that that hasn't changed that much in the last 4 or 5 years, even as the self-publishing community has grown so large. Generally, most people will be happy to share the name of their cover designer, their editor, the service they use to advertise their book. So ask an experienced self-publisher. They usually won't send you in the wrong direction.
I have actually found that is changing some, mostly with the last couple of upheavals on a certain board. Somebody shared the name of her cover designer, and that cover designer was inundated with people who wanted clones of that writer's covers.
This again is another function of self-publishing just becoming much more popular and viable. Like when you pretty much knew everyone by their first name, it's hard there's not much room for scammers to operate there. But when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, obviously you're going to get a few bad eggs. But I think you have to use your judgment. But in general, like if you're talking about which services should you use, who should you trust when you're handing over money. I think it's a good idea to canvass widely. Like, don't just get one person's opinion. Ask a few different people. And sometimes that's important in the case of, if we're talking about an ad site, sometimes an ad site might be mostly focused on romance readers, and it might be no good for historical fiction. So, try and get as much information as possible before you hand over money. And generally, like, there's after a little while, you'll start to learn the little signs of someone that might be a scammer or unscrupulous. They'll often try and tell you that it's a time-limited offer, like, you know, I've only got one place left, you've got to hand over money before 12 o'clock tonight, or else the price is going to double. You know, this kind of thing. If you feel someone pressuring you to hand over money, just walk away straight away, you know. Usually that's a sign that it's not good.
Unfortunately, that's what they teach in Marketing 101. That's one of the things.
Yeah, don't let them walk away.
Don't let them walk away. Limited time offer. This is a special thing.
But I should say something very important in terms of trust. You know, a lot of newbie writers will have very high opinions of some of the big five publishers, like, you know, Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins and Penguin Random House, and you know, that's fine. But I wouldn't let that extend to automatically trusting the services that these companies now sell, because a lot of publishers are moving into what's euphemistically known as the author services arena, as they all seek to you know, bring in extra income streams to replace some of those juicy hardback cover sales. So yeah, you've got to be careful, because Author Solutions is actually set up, even though it's owned by Penguin Random House, this is kind of indicative of the extreme incestuousness of publishing. But Penguin Random House owns Author Solutions. Author Solutions runs a white label vanity imprint on behalf of Hay House, on behalf of HarperCollins, on behalf of Simon & Schuster. It used to do one for Writer's Digest, that closed recently. It used to do one for Harlequin, that closed recently, and all sorts of others. There's a long, long list of them. You'll find it on my blog. So all I would say is, you know, don't automatically trust a company just because you recognize, you know, a nice, friendly-looking little penguin in the corner. Do your research on everybody. You know, do your research on me. Make sure you can trust me. I could be full of, you know, just don't trust anybody, because I think the publishing industry is very good at presenting a nice, smiling, and polite face. It's not so good at, you know, not stabbing you in the back. So just, yeah, don't trust anybody. Be careful, and, you know, don't hand over money unless you're really sure that this service is genuine and is being used by other writers.
Now, what do you do with the writers who are like, but David, I have been published for a whole 3 weeks now, and I'm not buying myself a Maserati. I want to buy a Maserati, David.
Well, join the queue. Join the queue. Look, success isn't as simple as clicking a button. You know, that's why they call it success, because it's kind of hard to achieve. Otherwise, you know, we would have a different word for it. So, you know, don't expect success. I think you should set your expectations appropriately. I think it's perfect. You really shouldn't make blanket statements about this stuff. But, you know, if you're a competent writer and if you're willing to learn, I think, you know, at the very least, you should be able to make, you know, a moderate level of money from the current self-publishing environment, as long as you take the right approach and present your work professionally, and, you know, use the effective and well-proven marketing strategies that are out there and that are easy enough for anyone to follow. There's no black art to this kind of stuff. You know, once you follow that kind of stuff and you put in the time, you learn how to write, you put in the time learning how to market your stuff, I think, you know, everybody can at least reach a moderate level of success. You know, assuming that they can actually write and they will actually put the time in, because, you know, a lot of people won't. They'll look for the shortcut. But I think, you know, the potential upside is huge. Some of the writers like a lot of the guys that I started with are selling lots more than I am right now, because, you know, I was quite obtuse and I didn't write in the same genre. I didn't want to write a series for ages. But I've still been making a living out of it for the last couple of years. But seeing like where some of these guys are selling, like, you know, a couple of authors I know are approaching 1 million books, and that just blows my mind, because I remember the position they were in 2011, starting out like the rest of us, and now, like, that's like dream levels of sales and readers, you know. But this is perfectly achievable, and it's not like they were, you know, the biggest talent to come along in a generation. They were good writers who could tell a good story, but they were smart about how they went about the marketing. They learned to write as quickly as they could, as well as they could. They presented their work in a professional way, and, you know, they got a bit of luck. You need a bit of luck with everything. But, you know, I know lots of writers out there have sold, you know, guys I started with as well, who've sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And, like, these aren't people that came from traditional publishing. These aren't celebrities of some sort. They didn't get anything free. They all started from zero, you know. And I can actually see each stage when they took a step up, like which series was the one to take them up to the next level. So I know in theory how to be really successful at this, and hopefully, you know, I'll actually do it in practice at some point. But I'm pretty happy with where I am, because, you know, at the start, I was trying to take a very long-term view of this. I want a career as a writer. I don't want a best-selling book. I want a career as a writer. I want to make a career as a writer, and I want to make a living from books for the rest of my life. You know, and if I end up making loads of money from it, that would be really cool. But as long as I can survive telling the stories that I want to tell, and you know, making the odd reader happy here and there, that's it. I'm actually living a dream right now. Like, that was a dream for so long, to make a living off book sales, and I've been doing that for the last couple of years. So that's really, really cool. But you know, lots and lots of money would also be cool for different reasons.
So basically, it is a question of being teachable, of wanting to learn, of taking the right steps, of writing as much as you can at the best quality that you can give, and just keep doing the work. Is that true? Yeah, and just make sure you set your expectations appropriately. Like, because like I've read all the success stories. I like reading them to see if I can glean anything from it. And virtually nobody was a success right out of the gate with their first book. In fact, I can only think of one person off the top of my head, and she had a little bit of a struggle after that because she didn't know what she did right, and she wasn't able to replicate it. I think it took her a few years until she had another book which sold pretty well. So most authors took quite a while before they started, you know, selling in insane numbers. Like, I've only had one patch where I sold like a really crazy amount of books. It was between, I think, September and November last year, and I sold something like 20,000 books in a 3-month period, which for me is really, really good. You know, I never usually sell anything that much. So like I can see how it's potentially possible, you know, and it's a case of, like, there's no way I could have done that right out of the gate. It took a little bit of experience to put together the marketing plan, you know, to make the contacts with other writers where we could do things together to generate those kind of sales. So, like, set your expectations. You're not going to be a bestseller overnight. Focus more on your craft, because I think a lot of beginners are spending so much time looking for the secret success button that they think all the experienced people are hiding from them, and they're not spending the time actually focusing on the craft. Look at what the bestsellers in your genre are doing, and don't slavishly copy them, but, you know, try and figure out what they're doing and why it's successful, and try and do something kind of similar to that. And just be a sponge, like, soak up as much information as you can. There's nothing writers like more than talking about themselves. So, you know, if you get a chance to talk to someone who's doing well, try and learn as much as possible from them. Like, I was lucky enough to bump into Bella Andre at a conference last September, and I actually got a chance to pick her brains. And, you know, that was what actually finally gave me the kick to go off and write a series. Like, just hearing her say it, like, I'd heard all this stuff before, but just, you know, talking to someone in person and you know, hearing it from their own mouth, it really makes a difference sometimes. And yeah, just be willing to learn. Like, you don't know everything. You know, you might. I think writers have this kind of weird dichotomy in their head where, you know, half the time you have to think you're brilliant, or else you won't wrestle the book over the finish line. But half the time you have to be full of self-doubt, or else you won't self-edit it properly, and you'll publish, you know, first draft garbage. So we're kind of all bipolar in a way, and we all kind of love and hate our work at the same time, and we can hold those two thoughts in our heads at the same time. So, you know, it's tricky. Like, but keep your expectations in check. Keep your ego in check. I think this is more of a problem for male writers than female writers. I think, you know, I think men and women can both do crazy in equal numbers. But I think, you know, in terms of like a really pompous ass, I think a man does that so much better than a woman. So just remember, you know, keep your ego in check. You're probably, when you're coming onto the scene, you're probably dealing with people that have been around for a while and have seen all sorts of personality types come and go. So just be a little bit humble, be open to, you know, open to information, and you'll be surprised what you get in return. Like when I started out, I think, as I said at the start, I'd only sold 150 or 200 books or something when I wrote the first edition of Let's Get Digital, and I emailed like 35 the top selling authors at the time. And I emailed loads of them, and virtually all of them replied and agreed to write, you know, a 1,000-page contributions for the book. And I was really shocked, because, like, I only actually wanted to put in, like, you know, 5 or 6, and I thought I would only get, like, you know, I thought I would only get 5 or 6 replies, but they all replied, and I think only one of them said no, so I had to put in 33 contributions at the end of the book. So yeah, you'll be surprised what you get in return if if you approach things with a little humility and try and leave some of the ego, try and check some of the ego a little bit.
So I have one more question. We are at the end of the hour, but I have one more question. Do you think that the field of self-publishing is as open and as able to that new people entering it now have just as much chance to make a living at it as ever?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked this. I was having this exact discussion with a fellow writer recently because I think she wrote a blog post that was widely circulated where she was saying just that it's much harder. And this is something that this view is expressed quite a lot, that it's much harder now, it was much easier in 2011. I don't believe that's true at all, actually. I can see why someone would come up with that, so I don't think it's a totally ridiculous notion or anything, because there's a lot more books out there now. I think when I started publishing in 2011, there might have been less than 1 million books in the Kindle store, probably around 800,000 or something, and now there's 4 million. Or something crazy like that. And those kind of top line numbers can really scare a writer, especially a newbie writer who doesn't know how they will ever get discovered by readers. But on the other side of the coin, the market has swelled dramatically. When I started in 2011, if someone sold 1,000 books in a month, that was headline news. People would be starting a thread on Kindle boards, and everyone would be celebrating, and people would be like, people would actually have agents, emailing them once they saw that someone had sold 1,000 copies a month. It was a big deal because the market was so much smaller then. Now you can pay $400 or $500 for a BookBub ad, and you can sell 2,000 in a day, and it's big deal. You sent an email and you filled out a form. That's how much bigger the market has gotten. That you pay for an ad and you can get 2,000 sales. It's crazy. So the market has swelled dramatically. The tools we have for reaching readers are much better. I think the prospective self-publisher has a lot better quality information at their fingertips about every conceivable topic. To do with copyright, ISBNs, metadata, what distributor should I use to reach the iTunes store? You can get answers to all those questions and you don't have to search very hard. So yeah, I think in one sense it's harder because there's more books, and I think because self-publishers generally have gotten a bit slicker in their presentation, and whereas in 2011 a really good cover would have made you stand out a lot, or maybe just running a sale at 99 cents, you wouldn't even have to do an ad. You would get a lot of sales from that because there just wasn't a lot of books for sale at 99 cents at the time. So now you have to be a bit smarter in terms of getting attention. So I think it's, I don't know, it's kind of just an academic question anyway, unless someone invents a time machine. But I don't think people should hold back from self-publishing because there's more books out there. The number of, it actually doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because if you look at Amazon, there's 4 million ebooks, but there's something like 9 million print books. So you're still going into a less crowded marketplace. And if you think the amount of books in the Kindle store is a good reason not to self-publish, you're going into the exact same marketplace if you go with a publisher. The publisher is still going to have to try and get readers to find your book somehow. And I would argue that you have a lot more tools at your disposal if you retain your rights, because you can't just go to your publisher and say, hey, will you buy me a BookBub ad and stick my book down to 99 cents for the weekend? They'll probably tell you to get in the queue, and it might never happen for you. But if you're a self-publisher, you can do that whenever you like.
If BookBub will take you.
if BookBub will take you, yeah.
Well,
Meet the new boss.
I'm exploring other options because BookBub is not taking my books yet. But yeah.
Yeah, well, look, that's a really big pain point for people. So I'd like to say something about that very quickly. I would say that don't give up on BookBub. I had a BookBub ad run earlier. I think I only ran one BookBub last year, or maybe 2, but I had something like 6 rejections from BookBub. So you just got to keep at them.
Oh yeah.
Like they say it's okay to resubmit a month later, so just do it. It's not like with agents, you can't where you really shouldn't be emailing them every month to see if they've changed their mind. It's not like that. Sometimes they just have too many applications for a slot. And I would also say, don't be shy when approaching something like BookBub. If you have a book which has won an award or sold a lot of copies, there's a comment box there for a reason. Pimp your book. Make it an obvious yes for them. And again, it goes back to things like presentation. If you've got a great cover, if you've got a really snappy blurb, if you've got a killer opening, it's going to be easier to get a yes. It's not a guaranteed one. I know one of those authors I was talking about earlier that's just about to hit 1 million books sold. He gets rejected all the time from BookBub. So you just gotta keep at them. And while you're waiting on BookBub to say yes, then start building your own platform, start building your mailing list. If they're not going to take your books, then put together a little campaign with ENT, with some of these other ad sites like Robin Reads, and just get the ball rolling, get sales going, get people signing up to your mailing list. So then the next time you release a book, it's going to slightly more people, and they have slightly more friends to tell, and you can bootstrap your way up.
Yeah, I love the idea of bootstrapping the way up. That's cool.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the centerpiece of self-publishing, is the responsibility ultimately lies with you, and it's your decisions that make or break you, and you can always really decide. So it's nothing. If you've been rejected with your own book by the traditional publishers for I don't know, 100 times, it's not going to happen. I had my agent show my young adult fantasy novel to all the 10 or 12 publishers that do that in Germany. They all rejected it. So I rewrote it, and they reapplied, they requeried a couple of them. They all rejected it. So that was a dead end for the novel, and we don't have dead ends anymore with self-publishing.
Yeah, and the person that's going to care most about your book in the entire world is you. You're never really going to give up on it. Like, I think everybody knows somebody who with a traditional publishing experience where their book was coming out on the weekend of the royal wedding, and they lost all the press that they were going to get. And the publisher can't. Usually they can't do a do-over the next week because they're publishing another 6 books next week, and they've got a duty to look after them. So sometimes, obviously we talk a lot about publishers can make a mistake, or an author can make a mistake, but sometimes stuff just happens, and it's nobody's fault. Like, it's nobody's fault that a royal wedding happens, or there's some crisis or tragedy in the news, and you lose your press coverage that you were going to get. That's nobody's fault. That's stuff that just happens. But publishers don't usually get a chance to go back and resuscitate the sales of that book, because they're so focused on this 6-week, 2-month window when they've got to try and get a book to take off, and they've got to move on to the next batch. But you never have to give up on a book. Like, I know there's one author who I always follow what he's doing. It's a guy called Ed Robertson. He's actually a great sci-fi writer as well, but he's always doing smart marketing experiments. And I was watching him. He had some book which wasn't selling very well. The cover was maybe a little bit too literary. I think the title was as well. And then after he had a lot of success with his Breakers series, he decided to relaunch it as a more kind of traditional-looking space opera. I think the story was generally a traditional-ish space opera, but he was just presenting it in kind of a way that wasn't appealing to readers. So he redid the cover. He got a new title on it. He ran a 99-cent sale. He got BookBub to accept it. And the book just took off. I think it was stuck at something like 1,000 in the rankings for ages, and it sold really well. And that's a standalone book, it wasn't a series or anything like that. And that book had been out for, I think, 2 years, 3 years, something like that, and it never really sold anything. But because he's the self-publisher and he's in control, he's able to go to an old book like that and give it a fresh lick of paint, and then it's suddenly able to find readers. So I don't think ebooks are quite forever. But I think ebooks have at least as many lives as cats do. So you will have plenty of chances. You have plenty of chances to find your readers. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you screw up, really. I know I said that the first impression is important with a reader, but if you get it wrong the first time around, there's still a whole bunch of readers that haven't encountered your stuff yet. So you always have a chance to go back, put together a new marketing campaign, or get a new cover, or maybe fix, if it needs another round of proofing or something like that. You always have a chance to do that, and that's the wonderful thing about being in control. If you're with a publisher, it's just going to gather dust in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, David, for joining us. This has been a great discussion.
Thanks for having me.
I have really, really enjoyed this. So this has been the 21st Century Writer Podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Diane Patterson.
And I'm Hannah Steenbach.
And our guest has been David Gaughran, and I will, of course, have links to David's sites and his books in the show notes. I guess that's it. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.